The internet has changed the way we live. It has changed the way we work, the way we shop, and even the way we date. It has also changed the way we kill.
I'm Donal MacIntyre, and I'm on a quest to explore the dark side of our online world, where one click can lead to murder.
The internet and social media has been a godsend to online predators. Why? Because of the speed in which they can, one, create fake profiles, but two, access victims.
I'll be investigating some of the most disturbing crimes in recent history, where the internet and social media have been used to trick, torture, and kill innocent victims, lured into a virtual world where nothing is as it seems.
Clearly, she did not realise the person she was talking to online was the man who was going to kill her.
In this programme, when Vicky Roberts married her husband Michael, she thought he was the man of her dreams. But beneath the veneer of domestic bliss, Michael Roberts was a serial adulterer. And when Vicky found out and confronted him, he strangled her to death.
Was Michael Roberts a sex addict who couldn't care less about the emotional distress he caused the woman who loved him? And was he always a killer in waiting, destined to descend into murderous violence the moment his wife confronted him? Almost half of British men admit to straying from their partners at least once. 32% of women admit the same. Thanks to social media, it's never been easier to find a partner to have a secret affair with. Fortunately, very few end in murder. But that's exactly what happened here in Cheshire in 2009.
In November that year, when 25-year-old Vicky Roberts checked her husband Michael's text and Facebook messages, she quickly realised he was being unfaithful, and not for the first time. When she confronted him with the evidence, he flew into a rage and strangled her to death.
I've come to Runcorn, where Vicky lived and where she died, and I'm here to discover the role social media played in destroying her marriage and to find out how it led to her murder.
Vicky Roberts was a carefree, church-going girl with lots of friends who remember her as having a vibrant and caring personality. She grew up in Cheshire with her brother and two sisters.
Vicky worked at this IKEA store, and it was here in 2006 where she first met Michael Roberts.
The son of a chemical engineer, Roberts had left school at 16.
Described as lanky and slightly awkward, it was also said he could be very self-assured, funny and confident, particularly around women. He was also said to be extremely flirtatious.
It was clear from his Facebook profile that he enjoyed the company of women. There was scores of photographs on there with him smiling, wearing sunglasses, looking like quite a cocky, confident young man.
He was a bit of a ladies' man, or he at least thought he was. He sounded like he had quite a few admirers where he worked, for a start.
If I'm honest, when I first met Mike, I wasn't too sure about him. He seemed very loud and a bit full of himself. But I got to know him and I thought he was a pretty decent guy. He was nice, he was funny, but he was very flirtatious with all the women he came across.
To the people who met him, Robert seemed like an average outgoing guy. But was there more to his personality than met the eye?
Roberts, in my opinion, was very insecure. He relied on company. He couldn't be independent. He had to have somebody with him the whole time, somebody on his arm.
Vicky quickly fell for Roberts and they soon embarked on a passionate relationship. It seems that Roberts had an insatiable sexual appetite and clearly felt the need to brag about the physical side of his and Vicky's relationship. Apparently, he told people they were having sex up to 5 times a day.
Anybody that has such an insatiable appetite for sex, 5, 6, perhaps even 7, 8 times a day, becomes a bit of a sign, an indicator that says, well, what's this person up to? What does this person want from the relationship? Roberts treated sex a bit like a drug. He couldn't do without it.
He wasn't driven by love or care. He was just driven by sex and domination and somebody who really just wanted to have his own way with somebody.
With Roberts, the root of his sexual need is the same as the root of his psychological need. It's about serving himself. He was making love to his ego. He's got all the traits of a narcissist.
Sex was clearly important to Robert's self-image, as were people's expectations of his relationship with Vicky. But very early on, it seems that something may have happened that severely impacted their sex life.
Roberts claimed that in the early stages of their relationship, Vicky fell pregnant and had a termination, resulting in a drop in their sexual activity. For a man with a voracious sexual appetite like Roberts, this was always bound to be an issue.
I imagine for Vicky, the decision to terminate a pregnancy would have been a terribly upsetting one to have to make. But it seems all Roberts cared about was how it affected their sex life. And later he claimed that he tried to rekindle things with Vicky in the bedroom by getting her to agree to engage in kinky, rough sex.
It would have become very much an S&M activity, a sadomasochistic activity, which may or may not have actually entertained Vicky to some degree, but certainly would have stimulated Roberts' appetite for more.
Not long after Vicky and Roberts got together, he left his job at IKEA to take up a position at a shop called Phones for You.
His new colleagues regarded him as a bit of a flash Harry. Soon after he started his new job, he went on a training day, and there he met a woman called Kerry. Roberts was instantly attracted to her.
Roberts engaged in an affair with a woman he met at Phones for You who had been enlisted to train him. This woman called Kerry described how they had an intense sexual relationship. She was a single mother, but he often visited her at home, and they enjoyed gymnastic sex.
I think Roberts would be attracted to Kerry because she was sexually confident. Because again, if he can get her, again, it's feeding his ego. And he likes that. He's got a very caring, loving woman at home, and he's going out for this, you know, this kind of sexual woman who is almost like himself in many ways. And he would have enjoyed that conquest. He would have enjoyed the fact that he could get somebody like that.
Just a few months after, one of her friends spotted a love bite on Kerry's neck. Kerry confided it was from Michael Roberts. She told her friend the sex was amazing and that they tried out things she'd never tried before. She said Roberts liked rough sex. Ominously, she confided in her friend that he also tried to throttle her.
It was clear early on that Roberts had a predilection for unconventional sex. Should the throttling incident with Kerry have rung any early alarm bells?
In domestic abuse risk assessments, there's a risk factor which is strangulation or even placing the hands around the neck. And the reason why that's a risk factor is that if you're doing that, it means that the escalation is there, that you can go from placing your hands around to squeezing. And that's very, very indicative of an underlying risk.
Despite Roberts taking every opportunity to indulge in his extramarital affair, he and Vicky set a date of June 2009 to get married. But it wasn't long before Vicky would discover that the man of her dreams wasn't everything he seemed. Vicky Roberts was murdered by her husband Michael in November 2009. From the moment they met, they enjoyed a whirlwind romance, and before too long, they were engaged to be married. But in the months leading up to their wedding, Vicky became more and more suspicious of her husband-to-be. Unable to control her doubts, she checked his messages and was distraught to find proof that he'd been cheating on her. Although she was devastated, Vicky still wanted to give their relationship another chance. So before they were due to be married, she wrote Roberts a letter, pleading with him to change his ways.
Roberts was a man who could talk his way out of any situation and tell people what they wanted to hear. Vicky, I think, was so desperate that she resorted to writing to Roberts because she knew that a face-to-face conversation would just result in him talking his way out of the situation and telling her what she wanted to hear. She needed him to take her seriously. The only way she could do that was to write it down for him to consider it.
Vicky wrote in a letter how much she was looking forward to their wedding day. Clearly, she wanted to spend the rest of her life married to Roberts. But this wasn't a story that was destined to end happily ever after.
The letter talked about how she was desperate to forgive him and desperate for the marriage to work. It talks about how much she loved him, but that she wasn't willing to share him with another woman. She was obviously head over heels for him. It's clear from the letter that she was desperately in love with him and desperately wanted them to be together.
After Vicky found out about the affair, Roberts promised his bride-to-be that he'd change his ways. But he lied. He didn't end his affair with his mistress, Kerry, and he didn't lose his interest in other women either.
There were rumours that Mike was seeing other women, but I didn't find that out till much later on. But phone's view was, we were all like a family. We did go out for drinks and meals together and events. Mike was very flirtatious with a lot of women.
Despite Vicky's misgivings, she and Roberts were married in June 2009. Their wedding photos show them as the very picture of happiness. But the smiles in the pictures masked a more sinister reality. And within weeks of their wedding day, Roberts was back on the prowl.
Not long after he got married, Roberts tired of his affair with Kerry. He cooled off the relationship and set his sights on his next conquest, Karen.
Karen was a fellow Phones For You employee who Roberts had met when he visited a branch of the shop in Bangor.
Karen had a fiancé at the time and confided in Roberts that she was unhappy in her relationship. He reciprocated by saying he was unhappy in his marriage and told her that he wished he'd never actually got married to Vicky and that it was all a mess.
Michael looked Karen up on Facebook and it turned out they had mutual friends. They began an online conversation which soon progressed to flirty text messages, dozens and then hundreds a day.
It is interesting that Roberts actually got rid of Kerry, who was a more feisty person, but took up Karen, who was far more submissive, somebody who would feed his ego very much.
Over the next few weeks, the pair met regularly, and in November they embarked on a sexual relationship, meeting in hotels and having sex in Robert's sports car. And his new affair quickly began to have an impact on his marriage.
In just over 1 month, he sent Karen over 5,000 messages. He's sending her illicit messages whilst he's having nights in with his own wife, while he's having dinner with his parents-in-law. It allows the pervasive presence of the third person in the relationship into the home.
It's probably stimulating him, the fact he can talk sexually and talk to these mistresses while his wife is sitting there. This would have been a turn-on for him.
To most people, this kind of behaviour would seem unthinkable. Was there perhaps something in Robert's personality that facilitated this level of duplicity?
Serial adulterers like Roberts often come up with psychological mechanisms for why they can do what they do. Often, they convince themselves that they deserve it. Why shouldn't they be happy? Why shouldn't they have their cake and eat it? And they will come up with these strange reasons that they use to justify the hurt and the upset that they could cause. Ultimately, of course, what we're looking at is someone who's selfish.
So soon after their wedding day, Roberts was deceiving Vicky once again. And once again, he was going to be found out.
Michael Roberts had a voracious appetite for regular sex with numerous partners. He also had a craving for rough sex, including throttling his partners. Was he a sex addict? Was this simply about pure hedonism or about controlling the opposite sex?
I've come to meet criminologist Dr. Elizabeth Yardley and psychologist Mike Berry to find out what they make of Roberts' extramarital affairs.
Was Roberts a sex addict?
There was some argument about whether such a thing as sex addiction exists or not. But what we can say in this case is he certainly liked the chase. He seemed to enjoy chasing after women, going from one to another, quickly moving on. I think he found that exciting, as do a lot of men, apparently.
And I think we've got to take a step back from it and say, well, what does sex represent? It represents power. It represents kind of status for him, essentially. And he's a man who wants to have his cake and eat it. He wants to have his wife at home, looking after his needs there, cooking his dinner, doing those types of things. And then he wants to go out and have fun on the side as well.
It is about fun. It's about hedonism. I mean, is this about control? Is it not simply about, listen, I want to have a lot of fun and sex is a recreation and, and if my wife doesn't like it, well, I'll just see if I can get away with it.
Essentially what it's about for me is his priority is his own wants and needs and desires. Doesn't matter about anybody else, as long as he's fulfilling the things that he wants, he's achieving the outcomes that he's pursuing, then, to hell with everyone else.
Vicky stayed with him throughout. She knew he was being unfaithful. She thought she resolved it. Why did she continue to stay with him?
Well, when she first met him, he wouldn't have been off having affairs with other women. He would have been very, very charming towards her. He would have been her knight in shining armour, and she'll want to be recreating that. So she wants him, she just doesn't want the cheating part of him, and she's hoping that Michael that she met is going to one day come back.
Mike, she clearly was prepared to forgive him as long as he could forget his past affairs and his past and current girlfriends.
But the history shows that he would continue. Once he's had a number of affairs, being married I don't think would have made the slightest bit of difference. Plus, he likes the excitement. This is clearly a guy who loves juggling all the balls up in the air and doesn't care about the consequences to other people.
He is right at the centre of a number of women's lives, and that's where he loves being in the spotlight.
Vicky Roberts was murdered by her husband Michael in November 2009. The couple had been married for just 5 months, and the wedding had gone ahead despite Vicky finding out he'd been having an affair. He promised to change his ways, but within weeks of their big day, Roberts was cheating on Vicky again with a colleague called Karen. On November 21st, 8 days before Vicky's death, Karen texted Roberts to say she had ended her relationship with her partner so she could be with him. Roberts replied to say he had also ended his relationship with Vicky and that he was now living at his parents' house.
Roberts clearly told Karen that he was leaving Vicky, leaving her for good. The marriage was finished, in order to keep things going with Karen, in order to keep her on board, because she is someone who is giving up a relationship herself and would expect the same from him.
Roberts clearly wanted to have his cake and eat it by keeping both Karen and Vicky on side. But his behaviour at home soon began to arouse Vicky's suspicions once again. He was spending an unusual amount of time online or texting other people and would fly into a rage if Vicky challenged him. Close friends remember that around this time, she grew increasingly unhappy.
She almost became obsessed with finding out information. And you can feel what an awful dark place she would have been in. And the more she doubted him, the more her self-esteem and the more darker place she would have entered, which led to her trying to find out as much as she could of what he was up to.
With her doubts mounting, Vicky decided to read her husband's Facebook messages. And she soon found clear-cut evidence of his affair with Karen.
She was distraught and heartbroken to think that despite just a few months of marriage and him promising to be faithful to her, that Roberts had begun an affair with another woman at work.
Vicky began to print out page upon page of Robert's secret correspondence. She told her friends that she was going to spy on him at work in order to catch a glimpse of his mistress. She was clearly distraught, though still keen to save her marriage.
In any relationship you're in, if you still love your partner, whatever that partner's going to do, you stand by them. You may confront them. Now, it's very easy for us to say, why didn't she just get out? She knew he was having affairs, but she loved him. And this was true love. And of course, true love can make us all blind at some stage.
When you look at her actions and how she's starting to look at his Facebook messages and his social media accounts, you can almost feel the desperation in her. She was so wanting her husband not to cheat on her, and she was devastated when she found out he was still doing that.
As well as making printouts of Robert's Facebook chats with other women, Vicky went through his wallet and found receipts from a hotel where he'd been spending time with his mistress, Karen. Vicky now felt she had conclusive proof of Robert's new infidelities, and the situation was now about to reach a critical point.
For Roberts, things would have been coming to a head because he was trying to live too many lives in the days of electronic recording, social media, photographs, and Facebook evidence.
Roberts repeatedly told Vicky that his extramarital affairs were over and done with. But at the very same time, he was also telling his mistress, Karen, that his marriage was over. If he really wanted to be with Karen, why didn't he just end things with Vicky?
Vicky gave him stability. Vicky gave him a sense of normality. This is my wife. This is my home. I finish work, I go home. Everybody likes to have an element of normality in their life.
Roberts had become trapped in his own web of lies and must have felt that he risked losing both Vicky and Karen, and that his whole world could come crashing down.
On the night before she died, Vicky and Roberts went to dinner at his parents' house before returning back to their flat here in Runcorn to watch TV. All the while, Roberts was texting his lover Karen, making arrangements to meet the following day. At the same time, Vicky was contemplating the receipts she had in her bag, which proved her husband's infidelity, including a bar bill from a hotel where he had taken his lover, Karen. It seems she had decided to confront him about his affairs once and for all.
On the morning of her murder, Vicky used her laptop to look up the hotel that Roberts had stayed in with Karen. It seems that finally she had decided to take action.
Vicky confronted him with some printouts of Facebook messages between him and Karen, and also some receipts from a hotel where they both stayed.
What did you get?
They argued, and it's thought that she threatened to tell his parents that he'd been cheating on his new wife. That appears to have been the tipping point.
I think at that point, he began to see no particular way out. He began to see this as a brick wall, as something whereby he was going to lose Vicky anyway, he was going to lose face. I think there was probably a rush of sadistic violence within him that came to the fore.
It seems that when confronted by Vicky, Roberts flew into a rage and overpowered her. And in a fit of anger, he put his hands around her neck. She resisted, but he was much too strong. Within a few minutes, Roberts had strangled Vicky to death. For the vast majority of people, taking the life of another human being is something they'd never contemplate. But what Roberts did after he killed Vicky suggests he wasn't like most people.
When we look at murder cases, the behaviour of the perpetrator after the murder is always really significant. That tells us a lot about what thought processes are going through their mind. It also tells us a lot about their personality. Anybody who has a kind of normal functioning personality, when they've done something like that, is going to be in a state of stress. They're going to be elated in some way. They're going to be nervous. They're going to be talking in a way that's not normal.
Hey, Karen. How are you?
Robert's actions after he killed Vicky showed a shockingly callous side to his character.
Oh, you watched the X Factor? Really?
One bizarre thing that happened on that night is he phoned his lover, Karen, and they spoke for over 2 hours, I think, about relatively mundane things, such as the X Factor, which kind of struck me as bizarre, really, because it's not the kind of thing that you talk about when you've just killed somebody.
For him to speak in such a normal way shows that he's got no remorse, he's got very little emotion, which is actually very significant and very indicative of psychopathic traits.
Thanks, bye.
Roberts clearly showed his lack of empathy and the fact that Vicky didn't really mean that much to him.
Could it be that Michael Roberts had been a psychopath all along? Roberts had killed Vicky in a fit of rage after she confronted him about his affair with Karen. But far from showing any remorse, he decided to carry on with his life as if nothing had happened.
The day after Roberts killed Vicky, he spent the afternoon shopping in Chester with his mistress Karen. He then headed off to a travel lodge in Bangor where they had sex. The next day he arrived at work late and looking very tired, and he told a colleague that he was late because Vicky had left him for someone else. That afternoon he sent a bogus text to Vicky. "Hey honey, how's your day going?" Roberts appeared to be a very accomplished liar.
Roberts sent text messages and other messages to family and friends of Vicky and used her own phone to try and establish that she was still alive and responding to stuff. He probably thought this was a pretty good way of covering up her disappearance.
His behaviour is really interesting. He's trying to create a situation where it's looking like he's not involved by sending messages to himself that makes it look like she's still alive.
I think, in fact, he probably saw this as some kind of success. So he probably began to enjoy this process because it's a process of manipulation and control over others, which he would have enjoyed.
It wasn't until December 1st, 2 days after he killed Vicky, that Robert set about disposing of her body. He visited a local supermarket where he bought refuse sacks and sponges. CCTV captured him casually eating crisps as he left the store.
It was just an everyday thing for him. It's as if he was shopping for oranges and apples.
The way that he's doing it is very calm. He's not hurried, he's not nervous. All of his behaviours are so indicative of a man that is not feeling anything. He's not feeling any emotion. He's not feeling upset, but he's also not feeling scared that he's going to get caught out. At this point, he really believes that he is going to get away with it.
Clearly, this shows that there was no empathy. There was no base care. Roberts was quite psychopathic in his nature.
Robert's actions seemed to display the mind of a calculating, cold-blooded killer. But do psychologist Mike Berry and criminologist Dr. Elizabeth Yardley agree that Michael Roberts was a psychopath?
I find it horrifying that he actually kills her and then is on the phone as if nothing had happened. He seems to be very psychopathic in the way he's dealt with her.
There's a real callousness and a complete lack of empathy, and it's not in the way that we would see it, oh my goodness, I've just killed my partner. He's not thinking that way. He's thinking, well, I've just solved a problem. And then he goes about his daily business covering up that problem.
Was Roberts planning to kill Vicky for some time?
I don't see any indication of this being a planned killing at all. It just doesn't have the planning that you would expect.
So you think it was still an impulsive act and not a planned
Yes, I think
act?
it was impulsive. I don't think he planned to kill her. I think the I'm going to leave her or it's all going to be over, it's just merely a way of keeping the mistress on the hook.
Might have been impulsive, but it was still murder.
Well, premeditation doesn't have to be days or hours or even minutes in the planning. It can be seconds. If you make a decision to end someone's life, that's murder, that's not manslaughter.
And he intended, it's a whole issue of intent. If he intended to harm her and knew the consequences of what his intentions were, then it's murder.
In June 2009, Vicky and Michael Roberts were married in what seemed like a dream wedding. But just 5 months later, their marriage would come to a deadly end.
When Vicky discovered evidence of his serial adultery, she confronted him, and he brutally murdered her in cold blood.
In the days after the murder, Roberts launched a diabolical campaign of deceit. Using Vicky's phone, he tried to cover his tracks and throw her friends, family, and even the police off the trail.
He sent himself a text from her mobile phone saying that I love you, but I can't keep this up anymore. I'm going to leave you. And I think he hoped that people would simply believe that he'd ran off, and that would explain why she'd disappeared.
Roberts's psychopathic ability to manipulate others came to the fore when he began to sort of give the illusion that Vicky was still around, that she'd actually gone off with somebody else. You know, and he was devastated, of course. And he just fluently made up a story and followed it through with friends and her relations, and used her own phone to actually text family and friends to give the illusion that Vicky was still alive.
Roberts was clearly planning to get away with murder. While he weaved his web of lies on social media, he also set about trying to dispose of the evidence of his crime. He carefully wrapped up Vicky's body and then dragged her corpse out of the flat so he could hide it in their garage. With Vicky's body stowed away, Roberts then went about his everyday life as though nothing unusual had happened.
Roberts was so convinced that he would get away with killing Vicky that almost immediately he began to prepare his flat to entertain his mistress, even to the extent of buying silk sheets for the bed. All the while, Vicky's body was secreted in the garage. Well, Vicky's parents got very worried, and on December 2nd, her dad contacted Roberts to ask about her whereabouts. Roberts maintained the subterfuge and said, "Haven't you heard? She's left me."
Her parents were demented with worry. It was so unusual for her not to call or text. They just couldn't believe that she would have run off with someone else and made no contact with them.
Roberts continued the ruse of texting from Vicky's phone to give the impression that she was still alive and that she'd just left him. He texted her mother and wrote, "Hey Mama, I assume by now Mike has shown you the message I sent. I'm really sorry for all of this and I'm okay. I didn't mean to worry you. Please don't be upset with me. I know it's all a huge shock. But I couldn't lie anymore. I will call you soon. I just need to sort my head out first. Please, please, don't be upset with me."
Roberts must have thought he had the mind of a criminal genius. But little did he know that it wasn't going to be that easy to deceive Vicky's loved ones.
Roberts believed he could get away with it. He was a man who's been able to talk people around his entire adult life. All he needed to do was get access to Vicky's phone, tell a few lies to the people that mattered, act that he was the injured party, and it was going to be easy. He's been lying to Vicky all this time about his relationships and had got away with it. Why would lying now not be any different for him?
And he didn't even seem to take care in how he worded the text. It was obvious to Vicky's mum and dad, for instance, that he was using language that she wouldn't normally use.
After 4 days, they became so suspicious that they decided to report her missing to police.
Within hours, the police were on the phone to Roberts.
Hello? Hello, is that Michael? It is. Hi, Michael, it's the police here at Runcorn. Okay. Hi, we've had a phone call off your wife's dad, and that she's missing at the moment. Right. Obviously, we're a little bit concerned at the moment. Is there anything else that you can tell us as to why she's gone?
Basically, I got a message yesterday saying that she's left me for someone else.
Oh, right.
She's basically left me for someone else. She's got her stuff with her, but all the clothes have gone. And as I explained to, because obviously they're a bit worried that it was, like a snatch and grab or something like that.
Right.
But as bad as it sounds, I've gone through everything. A passport's gone, a driving license is gone, and so obviously, as you can imagine, I'm devastated.
Okay. What I'll do, I'll just have a word with the sergeant and just see what he says. Obviously, I'll just tell him what you told me. Okay. And I'll see what he says. Am I all right to give you a ring back in a bit?
Yeah, sure.
With the police now involved, Roberts was rapidly losing control of the situation. And just a few hours after he first heard from the police, he received another call.
Hello, Mike Roberts speaking. Hi, Mike. It's Sergeant Phil Day speaking from Cheshire Police. Well, what we have to do, Mike, is report her missing from home. Right. I spoke to your colleague this morning. It's technically not because she's kind of said what she's done, if you get what I mean. It's not in person. Yeah. What I need to do, it might be difficult. I need you to go home and meet a police officer at your home address. Right. Can you leave now? Because there's a police officer been assigned. Yeah, give it to you. Okay, you can get back to work then. All right then, yeah, I'll leave now. I'll be about half an hour. All right, that's great. All right then, cheers. Thanks so much, mate. Cheers, Mike. Bye-bye.
At 2:40 p.m, officers visited the couple's home and did a quick search of the flat and the garage, but they never saw Vicky's body. They did notice, however, that Roberts appeared agitated.
The officers left, and Roberts may have thought he'd gotten away with his crime. But the police were intrigued by his anxious behaviour and decided to question him further.
They arrived back at the address that evening and they noticed a laptop bag full of printouts of Robert's online conversations. They asked him if he'd had an affair. He denied it. Suspicions raised, they decided to search the garage again. This time, they noticed a large wrapped-up object. They opened one end and it revealed Vicky's blood-stained hair and part of her head.
As the police officers were making their gruesome discovery, Roberts realised the game was up and made a break for it while they were in his garage. He sprinted off and managed to escape.
Roberts remained at large for 3 days, staying at hotels and using a variety of aliases.
The whole time his movements were being recorded on CCTV. While he was on the run, Roberts was even captured buying new clothes to try and throw the police off the scent.
He then went to Wrexham and waited for a female colleague to leave work. He then ushered her down an alleyway and begged her to believe that Vicky had died as a result of a sex game gone wrong. He claimed she'd choked on a dressing gown cord that Vicky had asked him to tie around her neck. His colleague didn't believe him and the police were called.
Roberts knew the game was up. From the moment they were alerted to his location, the police tracked him using CCTV. His erratic movements show a man who had realised there was now no way out. As they finally apprehended him, Roberts told the police he'd been waiting for them. He stuck to his story that Vicky had died in a sex game gone wrong. And given Roberts' liking for rough sex, he must have thought it was an entirely credible story. So was he about to get away with murder? Michael Roberts went on trial for Vicky's murder in September 2010. When he was in the dock, he thought he'd be able to convince the jury that he was innocent.
Roberts was very adept at producing stories, plausible stories. He was a salesman, and he approached the court case basically along the same lines.
We continued to maintain that he was innocent. He said that he admitted to the police that he had killed her, but claimed it was all an accident and part of this sex game that had gone wrong.
He had the obvious thing that, yes, he indulges in sadistic sex that involves that kind of strangulation, and that, unfortunately, he did make up the idea that he was using a gown cord to strangle Vicky, whereas in fact the labs would very definitely prove it was definitely not a gown cord, and really just undermine his story entirely.
How could Roberts continue to protest his innocence in the face of such overwhelming evidence?
Roberts had no empathy. In his own mind, he was innocent. And in his own mind, he had concocted this story, and he wasn't going to give way on that. He wasn't going to, let his ego, his narcissism dissolve through the floor of the court.
The prosecution easily proved that Roberts' version of events just couldn't be true, and his defence fell apart. After a 3-week trial, Roberts was found guilty of murder. He was jailed for a minimum of 17 years.
When the sentence was handed down, he cried quite a lot. He had been sobbing throughout most of the trial, but he certainly seemed to go to pieces. It's impossible to say why he reacted in that way. Obviously, nobody wants to go to prison, but I think part of him did genuinely think he would have gotten away with this crime. When he found that wasn't going to happen, I think a lot of his expectations came crashing down around him.
It's important for criminologists to categorise social media murderers to try to prevent similar cases happening in the future.
Doesn't matter about anybody else as long as he's fulfilling.
What kind of murderer do Dr. Elizabeth Yardley and Mike Berry think Roberts was?
Liz, how does this tap into the wider phenomenon of murders through social media?
Well, when we look at the function that social media played in relation to this murder, we've got the case of an imposter here. So this is somebody who uses social media to maintain the illusion that the victim's still alive, to buy themselves a little bit more time. But it's not just the murder that social media is playing a role here. He was using it to conduct his affairs at the same time. So it is in every corner of this case. It runs right throughout it.
And of course, Vicky used it to catch him out, to put him under surveillance, Mike.
Yes, I mean, she was very good in the sense that she actually got the evidence. Rather than do the usual emotional argument, I think you're with somebody, she actually was able to use the internet to show he had been playing away from home. And I think that was a very good use of the internet.
Is there any way this murder could have been avoided?
Well, I think we've got to look at the bigger picture here. We've got to look at not just the use of social media, but controlling and abusive relationships. So when you've got men like Roberts who are having affairs, who aren't changing their behaviour, everything is about them, they're incredibly narcissistic. When we start to hear reports from women that he slept with, that he's into strangulation and throttling, that's sending off some alarm bells. Those are significant red flags.
But what surprises you about this case?
Well, what surprises me about this case is something that we see all the time in relation to intimate partner homicides, but it's something that I continue to be surprised and annoyed by, and that's the kind of language that we use when we're talking about it. So often we'll focus on the victim's behaviour. So a lot of the media reports that I've read around this case are saying things like, why did she stay with him? Why was she giving him second chances? It's not her behaviour that's the problem, it's his. He's the one who decided to do this. So I think we should be focusing quite heavily on him.
Michael Roberts used social media to conduct his extramarital affairs, and Vicky used it to uncover his betrayal. No one guessed Roberts had the potential for such murderous violence. But when the truth came out, those who knew him as a cocky phone salesman found out all about his dark side.
I was absolutely gobsmacked. At first, I didn't believe that he'd done it. I thought there must have been some mistake. My heart goes out to Vicky's family, totally. To think what Vicky's mum must have gone through. It's heartbreaking. And the saddest thing is, when Mike gets out, he's still got his life ahead of him. She's got nothing, and he's took that away from her.